In developing news this morning, Breakfast can reveal One News reporters have been involved in the biggest global journalism project ever, uncovering some dark secrets of the rich and famous. Named the Pandora Papers, the massive leak shows how people use secrecy and tax havens to buy property, hide assets and avoid taxes. 600 journalists from 117 countries and territories have been involved in trawling through the data. We're talking about more than 330 politicians, 130 billionaires, celebrities, fraudsters, drug dealers, royals, religious leaders, and trillions of dollars. Following the 2016 release of the Panama Papers, the then national government moved to clean up the industry here, but a small tax loophole still exists in New Zealand. The only New Zealand media outlets involved in this wide-reaching investigation are Television New Zealand and the New Zealand Herald. Reporters Katie Bradford and Matt Nippert join us now. Morena, you two, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Morena, Matty.
Hey, Katie, we'll start with you. Can you just give us a little bit of background as to how you and Matt and Benedict from One News came involved in this investigation?
Morning. Just like the Panama Papers, the international consortium of journalists went around the world and basically picked up media organisations they wanted to be involved in this. Over 600 journalists, as you said, in Television New Zealand and the Herald or NZ were the ones selected to be involved here. Same as the Panama Papers, One News was involved then as well. And basically for months we've had access to a hub, a global hub of information where this data, these millions of leaked documents have been available only to those journalists who are accredited and part of this project to look through and hunt down some of these names, the developments, share information and build up all this information.
And Matt, talk us through the process of how journalists trawl through this massive amounts of data.
Well, it's pretty overwhelming to begin with. I mean, as a financial journalist, it's kind of like winning the golden tickets to Wonka's chocolate factory, because you're just sifting through and there are passport scans of fugitives, sort of financial statements, bank statements showing, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of payments to Swiss and Latvian bank accounts. It takes quite a long time to piece through that. And I've been poking around there for the past 6 months.
Yeah, Katie, give us the nitty-gritty. What exactly are the Panama Papers? The Pandora Papers?
Well, it moves on from the Panama Papers and is bigger than that. It shows the records of so many people, as you said. We're talking about celebrities, politicians, billionaires, a lot of criminals in here. Now, we need to make it clear that not everything involved in this is criminal behaviour. A lot of it is people who, the wealthy, the global elite, using offshore tax havens or loopholes around the world to put their money in. And that's not necessarily criminal behaviour. The ethics of it can be questionable, but there is a lot of criminal behaviour involved in this. People use it to buy real estate or to launder artwork and money and so forth. There's a lot of information in coming days that will come out about the sort of people that are involved in that, and Matt can talk to you a bit more about that. But it's the records of these people's tax dealings that have come, and I think here in New Zealand the question is do we still want to be seen as a destination where you can use trusts in New Zealand to avoid tax or evade tax or to hide some of your dealings?
You talk, Katie, about not necessarily there being criminal activity here, using loopholes and the such, but is there criminal activity here as well? Have people been breaking the law?
Not necessarily in New Zealand, but some of the people who have used New Zealand as a place to put their money are criminals, and that's where the ethics lies. And do we want New Zealand to be used in that way? Former Prime Minister John Key, who we have spoken to about this, he obviously was involved in the reforms the national government made following the Panama Papers, and he said he's always seen New Zealand as a place that is he wants offshore trusts to be here because they can boost the economy. Now the amount of money that it puts into the economy is not huge. But this is not illegal, and we're not saying that anyone here in New Zealand has acted illegally.
Matt, you have an example of someone, though, who has used New Zealand as a haven. Can you give us more details about that?
Yeah, well, we reported this in the paper this morning. There's a gentleman from Moldova, which is a former Soviet state, by the name of Vladimir Plahotniuk. He was sort of a big wheel in politics over there, and in 2011 decided to actually enter parliament rather than being a backroom figure. At that time, he set up an entity called the Oath of Trust, which was, given the regulation at the time, entirely secret. But we can see he put close to $200 million of assets in there, and pretty much it was all funneled and sent to his ex-wife in Switzerland. Now, Mr. Plahotniuk was a fairly controversial figure at the time when he set up this trust, and it's fair to say he only got more controversial in the time since. He has been implicated in a $1 billion banking fraud in Moldova and is sought by authorities there, and indeed fled his home country in 2019 after he lost office. I mean, I've tried contacting him for comment, but the last I heard, he's in Turkey in hiding.
It's honestly fascinating. Matt, how have New Zealand's trust laws changed since the 2016 Panama Papers?
Well, it was extremely Wild West prior to that, I think it's fair to say. They were set up during the fourth Labor government in 1988. In 2006, Australia started complaining that Australians were using them to dodge taxes, and so there was a basic amount of disclosure. That persisted until the Panama Papers, and now the trust operators need to tell IRD, who will then share it with other tax authorities, who's actually putting money into these things and who's taking it out. But yeah, there's this big question about this tax loophole, which allows foreign trusts, if you get the right jurisdictions involved, you can make them as tax-free vehicles. They're not subject to tax anywhere. It's quite striking. A real example about how the other 0.5% lives.
Yeah, and Katie, we talked about the fact that that there have been changes implemented since the Panama Papers in 2016. Have we heard from John Key or the current government about what they make of the Pandora Papers?
So there has, of course, been this global embargo on this, so this information could only be released publicly this morning. But we did speak, we have been approaching people over the past couple of weeks. I did have a quick chat to John Key, and he's provided us with a statement saying those changes were made. He believes, he does not think New Zealand is a tax haven in any way. And that Schuin review that came about after the Panama Papers closed a lot of those issues. Our government, Benedict Collins, one of our political reporters who you'll be speaking to shortly, he spoke to Revenue Minister David Parker last week just about where our laws sit at the moment. And David Parker's essentially saying, look, the bad boys have all left town. They're out of here. We're not too worried about this. But of course, there is a lot more information to come in coming days. Both the Herald and us here at One News will be releasing more information in the next few days. And we'll see where things head as a result of that.
Yeah, Matt, can you give us any kind of insight as to what we can expect over the coming days?
Well, there's sort of more figures that are used, these trusts, and and I can see on the sort of the international hub we're looking at, there's a lot more to come. I mean, this is just beginning.
Fascinating.
It's overwhelming, as Matt said. There's a lot of information there.
I bet. Well done, the two of you, and to Benedict as well, who, as you mentioned, will be catching up later on. It's a mammoth effort from the three of you. So thank you so much for your time this morning. That is One News reporter Katie Bradford and Matt Nippert from the New Zealand Herald.